The bullies thought the quiet nurse was easy prey. They had no idea he was a former Navy SEAL. Marcus Delacroix stood barely 5 feet 7 inches in his pristine white nursing scrubs, his slight frame making him appear almost fragile under the harsh fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Regional Medical Center. At 28, he possessed the kind of unassuming presence that allowed him to blend seamlessly into crowds. Sandy brown hair kept meticulously short, gentle hazel eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a soft-spoken demeanor that suggested someone who had never raised his voice in anger. His hands, though calloused in ways that careful observers might find curious, moved with practiced precision as he checked patient charts and administered medications. "Just keep your head down," he reminded himself daily. "You're here to heal, not to fight." The cardiac unit buzzed with its usual controlled chaos, but Marcus had learned to navigate its rhythms during his 3 months at St. Mary's. He had transferred here from a small clinic in rural Montana, seeking the anonymity that only a large city hospital could provide. What his new colleagues didn't know, what Marcus desperately hoped they would never discover, was that before nursing school, before his quiet life of caring for others, he had spent 8 years as a Navy SEAL. His hands had saved lives in field hospitals from Afghanistan to Somalia, but they had also ended them with cold efficiency when duty demanded. "That life is over," he told himself each morning while shaving. "You're Marcus the nurse now, not Lieutenant Delacroix." The trouble began on a Tuesday morning when Marcus accidentally bumped into Derek Kozlov in the medication room. Derek, a thick-set man in his early 30s with arms like tree trunks and a perpetual scowl, had been the unofficial king of the cardiac unit for 5 years. His close-cropped black hair, multiple tattoos visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves, and aggressive posture commanded respect through intimidation rather than competence. "Watch where you're going, newbie," Derek snarled, shoving Marcus backward with enough force to rattle the supply cabinet. "This isn't some backwoods clinic where you can bumble around like an idiot." Marcus steadied himself, his body automatically shifting into a defensive stance before he caught himself. "Don't react. Don't give them a reason. Sorry, Derek, it won't happen again." "Damn right it won't." Derek's voice carried enough volume to draw attention from other staff members. "Maybe if you spent less time hiding behind those little glasses and more time paying attention, you wouldn't be such a walking disaster." Trevor Hansen and Jake Morrison, Derek's constant companions, materialized as if summoned. Trevor, tall and lanky with prematurely graying hair, possessed a cruel intelligence that made his insults particularly cutting. Jake, broader than Derek but lacking his leader's natural aggression, compensated with volume and crude humor that delighted in others' discomfort. "Look at him shake," Jake laughed, his voice booming through the narrow space. "I bet he's never been in a real fight in his life. Probably runs home crying to mommy when things get tough." Marcus felt his jaw clench involuntarily. If they only knew that he had once taken down 3 armed insurgents in complete darkness, using nothing but his bare hands and a combat knife. If they understood that every fiber of his being was trained to identify threats, calculate weaknesses, and neutralize problems with lethal precision. But that was exactly what he was running from. "Violence solves nothing," he reminded himself, echoing the words of his therapist. "You came here to heal, not to hurt." "I need to get back to my patients," Marcus said quietly, attempting to step around the trio. Derek's thick arms shot out, blocking his path. "We're not done talking, Florence Nightingale. See, we've got a reputation to maintain here. This is a professional unit, and we can't have some amateur making us look bad." Amateur. The word stung more than Marcus cared to admit. He had probably seen more trauma, saved more lives under impossible conditions than all 3 of them combined. But admitting that would mean acknowledging his past, and his past was a door he refused to open. "I understand," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. I'll do better." "You'll do better?" Trevor's laugh was sharp and mocking. Listen to him. So polite, so submissive. What kind of man talks like that? Dr. Sarah Chen chose that moment to enter the medication room, her dark eyes immediately assessing the tension. As the unit's newest attending physician, she had faced her own challenges with Derek's crew, though her position afforded her certain protections that Marcus lacked. "Gentlemen," she said coolly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Is there a problem here?" Derek's expression shifted instantly, transforming his scowl into what he probably thought was a charming smile. "No problem, Doc. Just helping our new friend understand how things work around here." Sarah's gaze moved to Marcus, taking in his defensive posture and the careful way he held himself. Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, or simply professional concern. "Mr. Delacroix, weren't you supposed to check on Mrs. Patterson in 304? "Yes, ma'am." Marcus nodded gratefully, seizing the opportunity to escape. As he moved past Derek, the larger man's shoulder accidentally slammed into his, sending Marcus stumbling into the doorframe. "Whoops," Derek said with mock concern. "Better work on that coordination, newbie." The pattern established itself over the following weeks with depressing predictability. Derek and his followers seemed to take genuine pleasure in making Marcus's life miserable. They would accidentally knock charts from his hands, forcing him to scramble to collect scattered papers while patients and families watched. They would schedule him for double shifts, then mock his exhaustion. They would intercept his communications with other staff members, creating confusion that made Marcus appear incompetent. "Just endure it," Marcus told himself during a particularly difficult Thursday evening. He sat in his small apartment, ice pack pressed against a bruise on his shoulder where Jake had playfully punched him earlier. It will pass. Bullies get bored eventually, but Derek's crew showed no signs of boredom. If anything, their behavior was escalating. Friday morning brought a new humiliation when Marcus discovered that someone had superglued his locker shut. His spare scrubs, wallet, and car keys were trapped inside, leaving him to work a 12-hour shift in the same clothes he had worn the previous day. By noon, he was acutely aware of how he must appear to patients and colleagues alike. "Rough night, Delacroix?" Trevor asked with false sympathy during lunch break. "You look like you slept in those clothes." "Maybe he did," Jake added, his voice carrying across the entire break room. "Probably can't afford a proper apartment on a newbie's salary." Conversations stopped, heads turned. Marcus felt 24 pairs of eyes studying him, evaluating him, finding him wanting. In that moment, he understood with crystal clarity why Derek targeted him so relentlessly. It wasn't personal. It was territorial. By making Marcus a laughingstock, Derek reinforced his own position as alpha male of the unit. "Smart," Marcus admitted grudgingly. "Cruel, but tactically sound." "Excuse me," Marcus said quietly, standing to leave. "Where you going, champ?" Derek's voice followed him toward the door. "We're just getting started." That afternoon, Marcus made his first mistake. Dr. Sarah Chen was struggling with a particularly difficult intravenous insertion on an elderly patient when Derek appeared at her elbow, ostensibly offering help, but actually positioning himself to crowd her workspace. "Maybe you should let one of the experienced nurses handle this, Doc," Derek said, his tone condescending despite the formal address. "Some of us have been doing this longer." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her professional composure. "I've got it under control, thank you." "Just saying, no shame in asking for help." Derek's hand briefly touched her lower back, a gesture that could be dismissed as accidental but clearly wasn't. "We're all here to support each other." Marcus saw Sarah's face flush with anger and embarrassment. He also saw the way other staff members suddenly found urgent tasks elsewhere, unwilling to witness or intervene in what was clearly inappropriate behavior. Not your fight, he told himself. Stay out of it. But when Derek's hand lingered a moment too long, when Sarah stepped away only to have Derek follow, when the older man's voice dropped to a whisper that made Sarah visibly uncomfortable, Marcus found himself moving. "Derek," he said quietly from the doorway, "I need your help with a patient in 310. Derek's head snapped around, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Can't you handle it yourself, newbie?" "It's a code situation," Marcus lied smoothly. "I really need someone with experience." The interruption worked. Derek stepped away from Sarah, his territorial instincts kicking in at the suggestion that Marcus needed him. But as they walked down the hallway, Derek's expression grew increasingly dark. "You little shit," he hissed once they were out of earshot. "There's no code in 310, is there?" Marcus said nothing, but Derek didn't need confirmation. "You think you're some kind of white knight, some hero coming to the rescue?" Derek grabbed Marcus's arm, his grip strong enough to leave bruises. "Let me explain something to you, asshole. Dr. Chen is way out of your league. She's a real professional, not some wannabe nurse who can't even handle basic procedures. So you stay away from her, and you definitely don't interfere when your betters are talking." Your betters. The phrase echoed in Marcus's mind as Derek stalked away. In Afghanistan, Marcus had led teams of elite operators on missions that would haunt most people's nightmares. He had made split-second decisions that saved hundreds of civilian lives. He had earned decorations for valor that Derek couldn't even pronounce. But here, in the sterile halls of St. Mary's Regional Medical Center, he was just the quiet new guy who couldn't fight back. Yet a darker part of his mind whispered, "Who can't fight back yet?" The breaking point came 3 weeks later during the hospital's monthly safety drill. Fire alarms shrieked through the corridors as staff members guided patients through evacuation procedures. In the controlled chaos, Marcus found himself alone in the stairwell with Derek's crew. "Well, well," Derek said, blocking the stairwell exit. "Look what we have here." Marcus's combat instincts immediately catalogued the tactical situation. Enclosed space, 3 opponents, no witnesses, multiple escape routes blocked. His body began shifting into a combat stance before he forced himself to remain still. "Don't react. They want you to react." "Guys, we need to get downstairs," Marcus said reasonably. "The drill—" "Fuck the drill," Jake interrupted. "We need to have a little talk about respect." Trevor moved to block the upward staircase, completing their encirclement. "See, we've been way too patient with you, newbie. Trying to help you understand how things work around here, but you're not learning." "That thing with Dr. Chen," Derek stepped closer, his bulk filling Marcus's field of vision. "That was disrespectful to her and to me. She doesn't need some pathetic little nurse thinking he can rescue her." Marcus felt his breathing slow, his vision narrow. These were the physical precursors to what his instructors had called the switch. The moment when a trained killer stopped thinking like a civilian and started thinking like a weapon. Number. He forced himself to take a step backward, even though every instinct screamed at him to strike first. "You're not that person anymore. I was just trying to help with a patient situation," Marcus said quietly. "Bullshit!" Derek's hand shot out, slamming Marcus against the concrete wall. "You were showing off, trying to make me look bad in front of a hot doctor." "Well, guess what, asshole? It's time you learned your place." The first punch caught Marcus in the stomach, doubling him over. He could have blocked it, could have countered with a strike that would have shattered Derek's wrist, but he forced himself to absorb the impact. Don't fight back. Don't give them what they want. Jake's foot connected with Marcus's ribs as he struggled to breathe. "Not so tough now, are you?" Trevor joined in with enthusiasm, his longer reach allowing him to rain down blows while staying outside Marcus's potential strike range. "Maybe this will teach you some respect." For 90 seconds, that felt like hours, Marcus endured the beating, His ribs screamed with each impact. His glasses fell and shattered against the concrete steps. Blood ran from his nose and split lip, but through it all he kept his hands at his sides, refusing to retaliate. "I am not a killer anymore," he repeated like a mantra. "I am not a killer anymore." Finally, Derek stepped back, breathing hard from the exertion. "Stay down," he ordered, "and stay away from Dr. Chen. Next time, it'll be worse." They left him crumpled on the stairwell landing, alone with his pain and his principles. Marcus lay there for several minutes, taking inventory of his injuries with the clinical detachment of someone trained in combat medicine. 2 cracked ribs, possible. Contusions across his torso and arms, definitely. Ego bruised worse than his body, but alive, and more importantly, still himself. "You did the right thing," he told himself as he slowly pulled himself upright. "Violence isn't the answer." The next morning, Marcus arrived at work wearing sunglasses to hide his black eyes and moving carefully to avoid aggravating his injured ribs. He had crafted a story about falling down his apartment stairs. Clumsy, embarrassing, but plausible given his reputation as the unit's walking disaster. Dr. Sarah Chen wasn't buying it. "Those are defensive wounds," she said quietly when she cornered him in the supply closet during his break. Her medical training made her an expert at reading the language of violence written on human skin. "Someone worked you over pretty good." Marcus adjusted his sunglasses, wishing he had been more creative with concealer. "I'm fine, Dr. Chen. Just clumsy." "Sarah," she corrected automatically, then studied him with the intensity of someone trying to solve a particularly challenging diagnosis. "And you're not clumsy. I've watched you work for 3 months. Your hands are steadier than most surgeons, your reflexes are excellent, and you move like someone with serious training." She's observant. The thought was both alarming and oddly comforting. After months of being dismissed as incompetent, having someone recognize his actual abilities felt like validation. "I don't know what you mean," Marcus said carefully. Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. "I did my residency at Walter Reed. I've seen enough combat veterans to recognize the signs, the way you hold yourself, the way your eyes never stop scanning for threats, the way you position yourself near exits." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The way you didn't fight back yesterday." Marcus felt his carefully constructed facade cracking. "Sarah, whatever Derek and his cronies did to you, it's not going to stop here," she continued. "Men like that, they don't stop until someone makes them stop." "I know," Marcus thought. "I could make them stop permanently." "I can't," he said instead. "I won't." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Because you're trying to be better than them." "Because I'm trying to be better than I was." The honesty surprised them both. For a moment they stood in the cramped supply closet, surrounded by bandages and antiseptic, while the weight of unspoken understanding settled between them. "Just be careful," Sarah finally said, "and if you ever need someone to talk to." She left the invitation hanging as she slipped out of the closet, leaving Marcus alone with his principles and his pain. That afternoon brought a new humiliation when Derek announced to the entire break room that Marcus had fallen down some stairs like the uncoordinated klutz we all know he is. The laughter that followed felt like needles under Marcus's skin, but he endured it with the same stoic silence that had gotten him through the beating. "Patience," he reminded himself. "This too shall pass." But Derek was apparently just getting started. Over the following days, the harassment escalated beyond mere physical violence into psychological warfare. Marcus would arrive at work to find his assignments mysteriously changed, forcing him to scramble to catch up while looking unprofessional. His patient charts would disappear, only to reappear in random locations with subtle alterations that made his work appear sloppy. His car tires were repeatedly deflated, forcing him to arrive late and stay late, dealing with the inconvenience. Most cruelly, Derek began spreading rumors about Marcus's competence, whispering to other staff members about close calls and medication errors that existed only in his imagination. Marcus watched his professional reputation crumble under the weight of carefully crafted lies, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Fight back, the darker part of his mind urged. End this. No, Marcus replied firmly. That's not who I am anymore. The final straw came on a busy Thursday evening when the unit was already understaffed and running behind schedule. Marcus was checking on Mrs. Eleanor Vasquez, an elderly patient recovering from cardiac surgery, when he noticed irregularities in her chart that suggested someone had been tampering with her medication dosages. His blood ran cold as he realized what Derek had done. By altering Mrs. Vasquez's chart, Derek had created a situation where Marcus would appear to have made a potentially fatal medication error. If Marcus followed the altered instructions, the patient could suffer serious complications. If he didn't, he would appear to be ignoring doctor's orders. Clever, Marcus admitted grimly, and utterly evil. He was still examining the chart, trying to determine the extent of the sabotage, when Dr. Sarah Chen appeared at his shoulder. "Problem?" she asked quietly. Marcus showed her the chart, pointing out the inconsistencies between the doctor's written orders and the nursing notations. "Someone's been making changes," he said. "If I follow these dosages..." Sarah's face went pale as she realized the implications. This could kill her. "I know." Marcus's voice was deadly calm, which is exactly what someone wants to happen. They corrected Mrs. Vasquez's medication regimen in time, but the incident left Marcus shaking with rage. Derek had crossed a line from personal harassment into endangering innocent patients. That was unforgivable. Still not worth killing him over, Marcus told himself, but the conviction felt weaker than before. Friday morning brought the confrontation that changed everything. Marcus arrived early, hoping to avoid his tormentors and focus on his patients. He was checking inventory in the supply room when he heard raised voices from the hallway. Moving to the doorway, he saw Derek cornering Dr. Sarah Chen near the nurses' station. "Come on, Sarah," Derek was saying, his voice carrying that false note of friendliness that fooled no one. "Just one drink after your shift. What's the harm in that?" "I've already told you no, Derek." Sarah's voice was professionally polite, but Marcus could hear the tension underneath. "I don't date colleagues." "Date?" Derek laughed, but there was an ugly edge to the sound. "Who said anything about dating? I'm talking about two professionals getting to know each other better, unless you think you're too good for the rest of us." Marcus saw Sarah glance around, looking for support from the other staff members present. But just like during the fourth incident, everyone suddenly found urgent tasks elsewhere. The message was clear. Derek Kozlov ran this unit, and no one was willing to cross him for the sake of a female doctor who would probably move on to another department eventually anyway. "I need to get back to my patients," Sarah said firmly, attempting to step around Derek. Derek's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "I don't think you understand, Doc. I'm trying to be nice here, but nice only goes so far." Marcus saw Sarah's face change, saw the moment when professional courtesy gave way to genuine fear. He also saw Derek's grip tighten on Sarah's wrist, saw the way the older man loomed over her, using his size and position to intimidate. "Not my fight," Marcus told himself mechanically. "Stay out of it." But when Derek pulled Sarah closer, when his free hand moved to her hip in a gesture that was unmistakably sexual harassment, when Sarah's eyes went wide with panic and revulsion, something inside Marcus finally snapped. The supply room door slammed open with enough force to rattle the entire frame. Marcus stepped into the hallway, and for the first time in months, he wasn't trying to make himself smaller or less noticeable. His spine was straight, his shoulders square, and when he removed his sunglasses, his eyes held a coldness that made several nearby staff members take involuntary steps backward. "Let her go." His voice was quiet, but it carried with absolute authority. Derek's head snapped around, his expression shifting from surprise to contempt. Well, look who grew a spine. Get lost, newbie. This doesn't concern you." "I said let her go." Marcus took another step forward, and this time there was nothing submissive about his posture. Now, something in his tone must have penetrated Derek's arrogance, because the bigger man actually released Sarah's wrist. But instead of backing down, Derek turned to face Marcus fully, his chest puffed out in an aggressive display. "You threatening me, asshole?" Derek's voice rose, drawing more attention from staff and patients alike. "Because if you are, I'd be real careful. You already learned what happens when you don't show proper respect." Trevor and Jake materialized from nowhere, flanking their leader like hyenas, scenting blood. The three men formed a wall of hostile muscle between Marcus and the rest of the unit. "Maybe he needs another lesson," Jake suggested, cracking his knuckles theatrically. "In front of all these witnesses," Trevor added with mock concern. "That would be unfortunate. Someone might get hurt." Marcus felt the familiar calm descending over him, the combat mindset that had kept him alive in a dozen war zones. Time seemed to slow as his enhanced awareness catalogued every detail of the tactical situation. Derek, 6'2", approximately 230 pounds, right-handed, favoring his left leg slightly, probably from an old injury. Trevor, 6'4", lanky build suggesting reach advantage but less upper body strength, nervous fidgeting indicating he was more comfortable with psychological intimidation than physical confrontation. Jake, 5'10", stocky build, both hands clenched into fists, eager for violence but likely to telegraph his moves. Behind them, Sarah stood frozen with a mixture of fear and fascination. Around the edges of the confrontation, other staff members watched with the horrified anticipation of people witnessing a car accident. You could end all three of them in less than 30 seconds, the tactical part of his mind calculated with cold precision. Derek's throat is exposed, Trevor's stance is unbalanced, Jake's too eager, which makes him predictable. "I'm not threatening anyone," Marcus said quietly. "I'm simply asking you to treat Dr. Chen with the respect she deserves." Derek's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Respect? From you? The same little bitch who took a beating like a scared kid and didn't even fight back?" He stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "What makes you think you can—" He never finished the sentence. Marcus moved with fluid precision, his right hand darting forward to grab Derek's extended wrist, while his left arm swept upward to deflect the bigger man's potential counterattack. In the same motion, he pivoted on his left foot, using Derek's forward momentum against him as he applied a classic joint lock that sent the unit's self-proclaimed alpha male crashing face first into the nearest wall. The impact was loud enough to echo through the corridor. Derek's nose broke with an audible crack, blood immediately streaming down his face as he bounced off the wall and staggered backward. Trevor reacted first, launching himself at Marcus with a wild haymaker that telegraphed its trajectory from 3 feet away. Marcus sidestepped the clumsy attack, grabbed Trevor's extended arm, and used the tall man's momentum to execute a perfect hip throw that sent him tumbling across the linoleum floor. Trevor's head connected with the base of the nurse's station with a sickening thud, and he went limp. Jake, seeing his two companions neutralized in less than 5 seconds, hesitated just long enough for Marcus to close the distance between them. A single palm strike to the solar plexus folded Jake in half, gasping for breath. A follow-up knee to the face sent him sprawling unconscious beside his friend. The entire confrontation lasted less than 15 seconds. Marcus straightened his scrubs, his breathing barely elevated, and surveyed the aftermath with professional detachment. Derek was leaning against the wall, blood streaming from his broken nose, staring at Marcus with a mixture of shock and dawning terror. Trevor was unconscious but breathing steadily. Jake was also unconscious, though he would likely wake up with a severe headache and possibly missing teeth. The corridor had gone completely silent, except for Derek's labored breathing and the quiet hum of medical equipment. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered from the crowd of onlookers. Marcus turned to face the assembled staff members, his expression calm, but his eyes holding a hardness that made several people take involuntary steps backward. "Let me be very clear," he said, his voice carrying easily through the sudden silence. "I came to this hospital to help people, not to hurt them. For 3 months, I've endured harassment, assault, and sabotage because I hoped it would eventually stop." His gaze found Derek, who was still leaning against the wall, trying to stem the flow of blood from his nose. "But when you put patients at risk, when you assault female colleagues, when you create a hostile work environment that affects patient care, that ends now." He looked around the corridor, making eye contact with each person present. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I will not stand by while innocent people are threatened or harmed. Is that understood?" Nods all around. No one seemed capable of speech. Marcus turned to Dr. Sarah Chen, who was staring at him with undisguised amazement. "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly. Yes, thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Marcus replied. "You just needed someone to do what was right." Hospital security arrived within minutes, followed closely by the head nurse and doctor, Patricia Huang, the department chief. Marcus submitted to their questions calmly, explaining the situation with clinical precision, while Derek received medical attention for his broken nose. The security footage, when reviewed, told the story clearly. Derek and his crew had cornered Dr. Chen, escalated to physical harassment, and then threatened Marcus when he intervened. Marcus's response, while decisive, had been measured and appropriate to the threat level. Derek Kozlov, Trevor Hansen, and Jake Morrison were terminated before the end of the week. Hospital administration, faced with clear evidence of sexual harassment and assault, had no choice but to act swiftly and decisively. The legal department, terrified of potential lawsuits, negotiated severance packages contingent on non-disclosure agreements. The change in unit dynamics was immediate and profound. Staff members who had previously ignored Marcus now greeted him with respectful nods. Patients seemed to sense the shift in his demeanor and responded with increased trust and cooperation. Dr. Sarah Chen made a point of seeking out his input on difficult cases, publicly demonstrating her confidence in his abilities. Marcus found himself oddly uncomfortable with the newfound respect. He had spent months trying to blend into the background, and sudden visibility felt dangerous. "You're different now," Sarah observed during a quiet moment in the break room a week after the confrontation. "More present, I guess." Marcus considered her words carefully. "I spent a long time trying to be someone I wasn't. It was exhausting. And now I'm trying to find a balance between who I was and who I want to be." Sarah smiled. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing a good job." Marcus nodded his thanks, but privately he wondered if she would feel the same way, if she truly understood what he was capable of. The confrontation with Derek had been carefully controlled, precisely calibrated to neutralize the threat without causing permanent damage. But Marcus knew that in different circumstances with different stakes, he was capable of much worse. "The monster is still there," he acknowledged to himself. "I just found a better leash for it." 2 weeks later, Marcus encountered Derek in the hospital parking garage. The former nurse looked smaller somehow, his arrogant posture replaced by something that might have been humility. His nose was still slightly crooked despite medical attention, and he moved carefully, as if afraid of triggering another confrontation. "Marcus," Derek said quietly, as they passed near the elevator bank. Marcus stopped, his body automatically shifting into a defensive posture. "Derek, I wanted to say..." Derek struggled with words that clearly didn't come naturally to him. "What I did was wrong. The harassment, everything. I was out of line." Marcus studied the older man carefully, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. He found only exhaustion and what might have been genuine remorse. "Yes," Marcus agreed simply. "You were." Derek nodded, accepting the judgment without argument. "For whatever it's worth, I'm sorry. And I'm glad you stopped me before." He trailed off, unable or unwilling to complete the thought. "Before you did something that couldn't be undone," Marcus finished for him. "Yeah." Derek looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes for perhaps the first time since their confrontation. "I heard you were military. Special forces, maybe." Marcus didn't confirm or deny the speculation. Derek nodded, as if the silence were answer enough. "I was Army, back in the day. Regular infantry, nothing fancy. But I remember what guys like you were capable of." He paused, then added quietly, "I'm lucky you showed restraint." "You have no idea," Marcus thought, "but you're learning." "We all make choices," Marcus said aloud. "What matters is what we choose to do next." Derek extended his hand tentatively, as if unsure whether the gesture would be accepted. After a moment's hesitation, Marcus shook it. "Good luck, Derek." "You too, Marcus. And thank you for stopping me from becoming something worse." As Derek walked away, Marcus reflected on the strange turns life could take. 3 months ago, he had been a quiet, invisible nurse trying desperately to leave his violent past behind. Now he was still a nurse, but no longer invisible, no longer helpless. Perhaps that's the real lesson, he thought as he made his way to his car. Not that violence is always wrong, but that it should never be the first choice, and when it becomes necessary, it should be precise, controlled, and proportionate. The monster was still there, sleeping beneath the surface of Marcus Delacroix's carefully maintained civilian exterior, but it was no longer his master. It was simply another tool in his arsenal, to be used only when healing hands and gentle words weren't sufficient to protect the innocent. "I am not a killer anymore," he told himself as he drove home through the city lights. "But I am still a protector, and sometimes that's enough." Behind him, St. Mary's Regional Medical Center continued its vital work of healing, its cardiac unit now free from the toxic influence that had poisoned it for so long. Patients received better care, staff members felt safer, and one quiet nurse had learned that sometimes the best way to leave the past behind was to use its lessons to build a better future. The balance wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was honest, and it was his. And for the first time in years, Marcus Delacroix felt truly at peace with the man he had chosen to become.